12 running back tiers to get through today. It's going to be a challenge. Jamie giving us 12 running back tiers. Thank you for the hard work, Jamie. Appreciate it.
It was just basically going through my rankings and saying, okay, line. Is there really any other way to do it, though?
No, that's what you do, right? That makes sense. Hello, Heath. How's Georgia treating you?
Georgia's fine. No basketball games yesterday, so the boys are practicing right now, getting ready for the finals. But Georgia's good. It's the weird thing, and people, when they tell you that you live in South Florida, they're like, man, how do you deal with the heat? There's so many places that it's hotter than in South Florida, and Georgia is certainly one of them. Much, much hotter here.
But it's humid. It's humid in South Florida. Like it's 90. It's really hot up here now. It's gonna be 97 today, I think. But it's nothing like a Florida summer. Florida summers are hotter.
I don't believe in this dry heat nonsense.
Okay. All right, let's get to our running back tiers. I forgot to mention Podcast Awards yesterday. Please help us out. Go to podcastawards.com and nominate Fantasy Football Today in the sports category. podcastawards.com/app/sign up, or just go to podcastawards.com. You'll find it. It took me about 30 to 40 seconds to register and nominate Fantasy Football Today. We're in the sports category and the People's Choice category. If you're going to do one, do sports, but you can do both. It's super easy. Nominate Fantasy Football Today so we can win the Podcast Awards this year. It's going to be our year, baby. We keep getting so close. It's going to be our year. All right, tier 1 for Jamie is Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, and Bijan Robinson. A 3-man tier, McCaffrey, Hall, Robinson. So the other 2 that get sort of lumped in with them are Gibbs and Taylor, I guess just as like first-roundish picks. Why are these 3, the cream of the crop, Jamie?
We talked about this yesterday on CBS Sports Network, that I think these 3 guys feel like the safest bet to compete to be the number 1 guy. When you get to Jahmyr Gibbs, you need most likely a David Montgomery injury for him to get there. You need, I think, Jonathan Taylor to be significantly involved in the passing game or score 20 touchdowns. Both could happen, but feels like a stretch. Saquon Barkley needs to be, I think, rookie Saquon Barkley to get back to that level. Like these 3 guys, based on either what they showed, clearly McCaffrey is easy. Breece Hall last year, with being now 2 years removed from the ACL tear and the upside that he has. And then for Bijan, just the potential of what he was supposed to be last year, now with a better coaching staff, I think, for him, and the things that you're hearing coming out of Atlanta about, Christian McCaffrey type workload, feels like these 3 guys have the best upside and best potential. The one guy I think you can maybe throw into this group, if you so are inclined, would be Kyren Williams, if you believe that he's going to replicate what he did a year ago when he was second in points per game. But we all know the situation that Blake Corum could limit that upside, which is why he's in tier 2 for me.
Yeah, Heath, I don't think we have to spend too much time on tier 1, but I have a question, right? So what's the difference if they're all in the same tier? Why do we take McCaffrey first overall and then 4 wide receivers and then the second running back?
Well, I don't, but also I would agree with no thank you in the chat. It just depends on how many tiers you want to have, because if I do it based on my projections, he said CMC is in a tier of his own. If I do it based on my projections, there's a 35-point difference between Christian McCaffrey's projection and anybody else's. I agree with Jamie that I would definitely cut it off behind Robinson. But if I was actually trying to tier by projections and where the gaps in the projections are, it'd be tier 1 McCaffrey, tier 2 Hall and Robinson, and then the rest of those guys. I think that definitely it's closer to that than it is to including anybody else in this tier.
And I would agree with that as well. And again, to your point, Adam, you could certainly make the case that the 3 running backs could go back to back to back. If you want to draft that way, and you can make a case that the 5 receivers can go ahead of all 3 running backs. If you want to go a different route as well. And there's a lot of people that are saying CeeDee Lamb should be the number 1 overall pick. I think the one thing that for me is these 3 running backs are the only ones I feel are guaranteed first round picks. Mm-hmm. There's no sure thing that any other running back will be a first rounder. Now, I think we can probably expect that because of just how people draft. So whether it's Gibbs or Taylor or Barkley or Kyren, they all have the opportunity to be first round picks. These 3 guys are going to be first round picks, slam dunks. No doubt about it.
So that's McCaffrey, Breece Hall, and Bijan Robinson. And I say, why do we take McCaffrey, then 4 wide receivers? That's kind of like what I see a lot in our drafts. It's not necessarily what's happening. I mean, look at CBS ADP. Actually, Breece Hall is the second player off the board, and Robinson's fourth. It's McCaffrey, Hall, Lamb, Robinson, Hill, Chase, and then Barkley. So still, I mean, that's surprising to me. But we'll talk about him in a moment in tier 2. Look at Fantasy Pros ADP. It's McCaffrey, Lamb, Hill, Breece Hall, Chase, Jefferson, Bijan Robinson. So Hall gets pushed in there. Oh, sorry, that's standard scoring. My bad. PPR scoring. Okay, is McCaffrey, Lamb, Hill, Chase, Jefferson. Yeah, okay, that's what I was talking about. McCaffrey, and then 5 wide receivers, and then Bijan, AJ Brown, Breece Hall. All right, let's go to tier 2. Tier 2 is 4 players: Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, and Kyren Williams. This is Jamie's tier 2. Gibbs, Barkley, Taylor, Kyren Williams. Heath, your thoughts on that? You agree with this tier?
I think you could probably say what my thoughts are on that. Like, I agree 100% with Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, and Kyren Williams in tier 2. And I've got Saquon Barkley a tier or 2 behind this. But I think that Gibbs, Taylor, and Kyren are, for me, the 3 most likely guys to make that jump into the next tier.
Okay, Jamie, what's tier 2? If tier 1 are the guys that are guaranteed to be first-round picks, tier 2 is what?
They'll be back end round 1, early part of round 2. Certainly round 2, depending on how your draft goes, where the quarterbacks start to get mixed in there. If you see, any of the tight ends as well, but I don't think will impact this group of running backs. But for me, these are guys that are, basically back end round 1, beginning of round 2 guys.
And I will say, like, just looking at Jamie's tiers, and I've been writing a lot of running back content lately. My busts came out last week, and I'm writing the running back preview today. Very, very similar in terms of our first 4 or 5 tiers, except for 2 of my busts based on where they're being drafted. I would have a couple tiers lower, and Barkley's one of those guys. Adam, you said it. I think he's the 9th highest drafted player on CBS right now. And I just don't think there's that big of a boost going to Philadelphia, and it could turn out to be wrong. But I think Hurts, while the offensive line is going to be better, it's not going to be as good as it was last year, and Hurts may not be a total net positive for Barkley.
Well, I think you lump Barkley and Taylor, right? You can ask the same questions. Taylor, of course, is younger. He's shown in recent years to be a more explosive, more dynamic.
He's a better rusher.
Yeah, I mean, I think he is. I don't want to discount the possibility that Saquon Barkley just becomes a much more efficient rusher with the Eagles, right? Because it's possible that if Barkley had been running behind the Colts offensive line, we'd be thinking about him a little bit differently. But fine, I'm saying that Taylor's a better rusher than Barkley. But someone brought this up in a mailbag. An emailer brought this up a couple of weeks ago. Do we ever see mobile quarterbacks produce first-round caliber running backs? And Taylor and Barkley are both going to have to deal with the same issues. Quarterbacks that are going to steal touchdowns and quarterbacks that probably aren't going to throw running backs that much. So I guess do they both have that concern, Heath? Why just Barkley for you?
Cam McCaffrey is the one I can think of.
Yeah.
There's probably there's others, but I'm sure, but that's the only one I can think of right now.
If there are others, because I think that was the only one that I could think of.
Was RG3's big year with Alfred Morris? Am I getting that correct?
I don't know. Mark Ingram
had the Lamar one's weird because there was definitely seasons that if you put together Mark Ingram before he got hurt and J.K. Dobbins after he got hurt, then that was definitely a first round caliber running back, right?
I'm not sure. Ingram had a really good year, probably like second round caliber, where he caught 5 touchdowns, something like that.
I don't think I have either one of these guys in the first round either. But the difference for me is, one, that I think Taylor's a better rusher, and 2, I am not concerned about Taylor's age, and Barkley's getting close to the point where I would be concerned about that. And then 3, I think it's possible that Anthony Richardson rushes in the red zone at the same rate that Jalen Hurts has, but it seems like it's more certain that Hurts will. The tush push hasn't been a thing yet in Indianapolis.
True, but the guy who started it is now the head coach in Indianapolis. So,
right.
You have to wonder how much that will factor in. For me, it's the role in the passing game. I saw last year what they did with DeAndre Swift despite that. So it's kind of really 2 years of data that I look at with Barkley. because with their backfield for the Eagles, Miles Sanders scored 11 rushing touchdowns 2 years ago. So it's not like a running back can't get to double-digit touchdowns. And we've noted time and time again how many times that DeAndre Swift fell down at the 1-yard line. Plus now the loss of Jason Kelce. So will the tush push still be as effective, and will they go to it as much? And the other part of it is, Swift had 39 catches last year in 16 games. Barkley's kind of been living in that 40 to 50 catch range the last couple of years with mostly a mobile quarterback. Daniel Jones isn't exactly the most efficient passer, as we're well aware of. So I think he'll still be around 45 catches would be my guess. And I don't think Taylor sniffs that. And so if the touchdowns are going to favor Taylor, which they should, the rushing production, I think, will favor Taylor, but I don't know by how much. I still think those catches for Barkley will put him a little bit over the edge. And I think that the touchdowns will come back a little bit more to the norm of what the Eagles will score. So I like Barkley slightly better in PPR and half PPR. In non-PPR, I would take Taylor. But for me, they're basically back-to-back.
You're going to hear me repeat a lot of things. If you've been listening all offseason, we have a lot of new people coming into the show right around now and throughout the next few weeks. So there's going to be a lot of repeat information for those loyal viewers and listeners. So sorry about that. You've probably forgotten some of it anyway. But you look at that tier, again, it's Gibbs, Barkley, Taylor, and Kyren Williams. And Gibbs, the last 9 games of the season when David Montgomery returned from injury, he was the number 10 running back per game in half PPR and full PPR. David Montgomery had 125 carries. Gibbs had 200 carries. That almost seems... No. I'm sorry. He had 100. That was a 17-game pace. He had 106 carries. Montgomery had 125. Gibbs had 24 catches. He was on pace for only 45 in that stretch. He wasn't a huge pass catcher, but I guess my point is, it seems like in fantasy, tell me if you agree, 3 running backs, 5 wide receivers that you probably can't even really make a bust case for. I mean, these guys are super safe. They're the Elite 8. And then as soon as you get to tier 2 at running back, I can make easy bust because they might go in the first round, not bust because they're going to be bad. Bust cases for Gibbs, Barkley, Taylor, and Kyren. And AJ Brown, I don't know. Puka, Garrett Wilson. You've got question marks immediately. But do you agree with that premise, first of all?
There is an Elite 8. And yes, I think that you start to, get to that point from, 9 on is, okay, is this guy better than that guy? Is this position safer than that position, running back versus receiver? I think, again, that's why I'll go back to, when we start to see ADP for most drafts, you're going to start to see the quarterbacks come into play back end of the first round, because that's just how people draft, no matter what we say, no matter how many times you can, explain the smarter way to build your teams, people still like their quarterbacks for the simple reason that they're safe. So I don't know, AJ Brown, probably, you call him the bridge guy, because I think he's relatively safe. But yes, Garrett Wilson has question marks. Puka has question marks. These 4 guys in tier 2 at the running back position have question marks, so it does feel like it, and I was talking to somebody last night who was doing a best ball draft. They had pick 11. They were like, this is a nightmare. I'm like, it's not a nightmare.
No, it's not.
It's fine. But, you start to see those first 8 guys go off the board. Remember Dan in our magazine draft and how much he was like, I hate pick 12. I hate pick 12 because I don't, there's a tier drop off for him. For him, he included Brown and AJ and AJ Brown and Garrett Wilson. He was like, I don't love Puka at the back end of round 1. So, they're just people that don't feel comfortable with these players in the spot, but there's still so much upside.
Yeah. So my last question, and we're going to answer it after a break, but my question that we'll tease now is there more uncertainty with the running backs, Gibbs, Barkley, Taylor, Kyren, or the wide receivers, AJ Brown, Puka, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison? I don't think I'm forgetting anyone. Will tell me that after this break on Fantasy Football Today.
When you need your sports news anywhere,
we've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
So it's really 4 on 4 here. If you think about it, it's the 4 running backs in tier 2. Gibbs for Jamie. Gibbs, Barkley, Kyren, and Taylor. It's not in that order. It's Gibbs, Barkley, Taylor, Kyren, and then it's 4 wide receivers: AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, Marvin Harrison. Heath, which tier feels riskier to you? Tier 2 at receiver or tier 2 at running back?
I think if you put A.J. Brown as that bridge guy, then the wide receivers are riskier. Just because, like, Puka, we don't know when Cooper Kupp's 100% healthy. Garrett Wilson's never really done anything to justify where he's being drafted yet. We're just hoping that Aaron Rodgers can be good again. Harrison's a rookie. So I'm more confident that these running backs are going to have high volume and be really good, except for A.J. Brown.
Right. Okay. So would you guys take A.J. Brown ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd take the receivers ahead of the running backs too.
Generally speaking. Okay. And of course, this is a position where you could, if you want, take one of each. This is always a late first round, always a good time. You don't have to do it, but running back, wide receiver is never a bad way that point in the draft to start your draft. All right, let's go to tier 3. It is Travis Etienne, James Cook, Isiah Pacheco, Derrick Henry, and Rachaad White. Etienne, Cook, Pacheco, Henry, Rachaad White. That's for Jamie. Heath, your reaction to tier 3, Etienne, Cook, Pacheco, Henry, White.
But again, I think you could probably say it for me. It's one of these guys is not like the other. I have the 30-year-old, and I'm surprised that Jamie the ageist has Derrick Henry in tier 3. But no, I have the 30-year-old running back, I think, in tier 5 or tier 6. But again, full agree on Travis Etienne, James Cook, Isiah Pacheco, Rachaad White. I think they all offer the upside of being even better than this. I would not be completely flabbergasted by any of these 4 running backs finishing as a top 5 running back this season. They all come with a little bit more risk than the group in front of them. Travis Etienne hasn't been particularly efficient. They're talking about taking work off of his plate. James Cook never scores touchdowns. The Chiefs are going to throw again. Rachaad White, kind of like Etienne, hasn't run very well. But I could still see like anyone from tier 3 being in my tier, at least in this group, being a top 5 running back this year.
Yeah, Jamie, I thought Etienne being in this tier was interesting. I thought he might make it into tier 2. I felt like he, I'll just leave it at that. I guess I would have put him at the end of tier 2 instead of with Cook, Pacheco, Henry, and Rachaad White. That's Etienne. What do you think?
Again, kind of looking at it more from a draft perspective, I could see any of the other 4 guys being back end of round 1 guys. I don't think anybody's taking Travis Etienne in the first round. So he, for me, is a round 2 pick. And to be honest, I struggle with him staying atop this list if they are going to reduce his workload in any capacity. Now for me, it's more talk than I think it is factual because Tank Bigsby struggled. He apparently struggled again in, OTAs. And so is there anybody else there that they're going to trust? Is it Dearness Johnson? Are they going to, kick the tires on somebody that might get cut, maybe make a trade? It feels like they want to limit his workload to some capacity. I don't understand why, but they want to. Maybe they just have some durability questions. So I feel like he's more in line with this group than he is with the group ahead of him, just from a standpoint of upside and potential workload concerns.
Yeah, I think Etienne gets more touches than Jacob Gibbs, Jahmyr Gibbs. Do you guys agree with? Not to say that he should be going ahead of him.
He might, and that's a fair question, and he might get more than Kyren Williams this year. Based on how things could unfold. But I the one thing is you don't want to buy into coach speak, and you don't want to buy into things that necessarily come from the franchise until you see it. But the Lions have been pretty transparent about Jahmyr Gibbs, and the fact that Brad Holmes, the GM, said that they're going to give him more work. I think they're going to give him more work, and so where does that come? Does that come from the passing game, which makes sense? Again, there's 64 vacated targets, just if you go year over year. Does it come from taking work off of David Montgomery? And the thing that, is hard to overlook, like you said, the back end stretch when David Montgomery was there, he still had 5 rushing touchdowns in the final 6 games, Jahmyr Gibbs. And so I know it wasn't all goal line opportunities and things like that, but it's still one of those situations where there's a lot to like about the upside of what he can be with a bigger workload. And then you go to the 2 of the 3 games that David Montgomery missed, and it was 26 and 29 PPR points. Like, that's hard to overlook. Like, if David Montgomery were to get a significantly reduced workload, my God, Jahmyr Gibbs, like you said, Adam, if we knew Montgomery was out of the way, he'd be in the conversation for number 1 overall.
Yeah, no, in the last 9 games, they had the same amount of carries inside the 5-yard line. It's actually 11 for Montgomery and 10 for Gibbs, which is By the way, like, an incredible number. Those two combined for 21 carries inside the 5-yard line in the last 9 games of the season. I think Saquon Barkley had like 6 all year or something like that. Something really low. But then in the postseason, David Montgomery had 8 carries inside the 5-yard line and Jahmyr Gibbs had 0. So that was an interesting development. Gibbs still scored touchdowns. They just weren't short yardage ones. All right. So tier 3 for Jamie is Etienne, James Cook, Pacheco, Derrick Henry, and Rachaad White. Heath does not like Henry in this tier. Do you put Barkley in that tier with Etienne, Cook, Pacheco, and White, Heath?
Yes, this is exactly where I put Saquon Barkley.
Okay. All right. Tier 3 ends with Rachaad White. Tier 4 starts with Alvin Kamara. Just to mix it up, I'll just say, I don't know why Kamara goes after White. They feel like the same player, except Kamara is older. And
you answered your own question there.
Yeah, except I think
like you just don't care about age for players.
Oh, I do. I definitely do. But I also care about Rachaad White basically being, I really hate saying this. All right, I'll just say least efficient. It's basically been the least efficient running back in football for his 2-year career.
What has Kamara been the last 2 years?
Bad, but better than Rachaad White. And which is saying something. You know, I have the same concerns about both of them. I favor Kamara because I have a harder time seeing him lose work. If they're both struggling, I see White maybe getting fewer carries than Kamara. But Kamara's like my favorite. It's so scary to attach yourself to an old guy who hasn't been playing well, but he doesn't go this high. I like that you have him in this tier, Jamie. I feel like he's so disrespected that he's either at the end of this tier or lower in ADP. So I keep getting him, but I wouldn't take him in the 3rd round, which is basically like tier 4 feels like a 3rd round tier. Kamara, Jacobs, Achane, Ken Walker, and Mixon. Kamara, Jacobs, Achane, Walker, Mixon. You think these guys are 3rd round picks?
No, back end of 3rd round at best. The thing about Kamara is, first off, he will fall if he doesn't show up on time for training camp. You know, he's dealing with a contract situation right now, so he could slip. And again, this is a, format specific ranking or tier because you need him to be 70 plus catches. If he's not 70 plus catches, he's going to struggle because of Kendre Miller getting more work, Taysom Hill still being there. I know that's a surprise to you, Adam, but Taysom Hill's still there. And whatever they decide to give Jamal Williams, but there's a lot of mouths to feed in this backfield. But if there was we sit here and we've heard a lot of Christian McCaffrey talk in Atlanta because of the new coaching staff. Well, where is the coaching staff coming from? The offensive coordinator coming from New Orleans. He's coming from San Francisco. So what that role means for that running back in the passing game. And this is arguably the best guy to do it since he's come in the league, or second best guy to do it since he's come in the league, behind McCaffrey. So I think there's a lot of opportunities here for Kamara to still be. Last year per game, he was the best pass catching back. He finished 1 reception behind Breece Hall. He was number 1 in terms of targets per game from the position, 6.6. So it's hard to overlook that. Yes, he's older. Yes, there's concerns. He hasn't been a good runner, but again, what he does as a pass catcher, and even factoring the 13 catch game when he first came back, what was it? 13 catches for 33 yards. It was miserable, which is the argument for people that hate PPR. But he's still going to have those chances, and that's hard to get past in this format.
All right, not to make this all about Kamara, right? Let's focus on the tiers here. 2 questions. First of all, if Kamara, Josh Jacobs, Devon Achane, Ken Walker, and Joe Mixon, just to clarify, you think they should start going late in the 3rd round?
Yeah, I think I probably have Kamara middle of the 3rd round, but the rest of these guys toward the back end.
Yeah, and he has
Jacobs. Most of the other, Kamara and Jacobs are in the 3rd round. Jacobs at the back in the 3rd round. Achane, Walker, and Mixon are 4th round picks for me.
And Kamara, I'm looking at a bunch of different sites. He's at the earliest a late round 4 pick, and he goes after a lot of these guys that are in the same tier: Jacobs, Achane, Walker, and Mixon. All right, so I think so far, if we could recap the show, tier 1 was the big 3 of McCaffrey, Hall, Robinson. Tier 2 was Gibbs for Jamie. Gibbs, Barkley, Taylor, and Kyren. No Barkley in there for Heath. But we see a difference, a significant or an obvious difference between tier 1 and tier 2. So again, tier 2, Gibbs, Barkley, Taylor, Kyren. Tier 3, Etienne, Cook, Pacheco, Henry, White. I think you guys laid out pretty clear differences between tiers 2 and 3. What's the difference between tiers 3 and 4? Personally, I don't know that I see it. And I'm not disagreeing with the tier. Like you can't, you're not going to have a 10-player tier. I get it. But I feel like these tiers are pretty even, you know? Again, tier 3 is Etienne, Cook, Pacheco, Henry, and White. Tier 4 is Kamara, Jacobs, Achane, Walker, and Mixon. I hope that didn't come off as critical. I'm not criticizing the tier. But I think I feel like they're kind of similar. Heath, what do you think?
There's a lot more question marks about the guys in tier 4 than the guys in tier 3. We talked about it with Kamara, like his age and is he any good anymore? Jacob and Mixon both going to new teams, and the Packers can't stop talking about how much they want Marshawn Lloyd to touch the football. I don't think Jacobs is necessarily going to be a workhorse back, and if he's not, well, he can't be a tier 3 back probably with his efficiency. Achane, how many times is he going to touch the ball, and how much can he hold up? And then Walker has the battle with Charbonnet with a new coaching staff and the battle with his own injuries.
How do you see it, Jamie? Do you think there's a big difference between tiers 3 and 4?
Not a huge difference, but a difference, and Heath laid it out perfectly. There's question marks really for a lot of these guys. I mean, we talked about Etienne, James Cook, people are wondering, can he score touchdowns? Is Ray Davis going to steal those opportunities after only had 2 last year and 6 total? Derrick Henry's 30. Pacheco, might feel like the safest, but you never know with the Chiefs if they get more creative in the red zone and don't, rely on their run game as much. And Rachaad White, Adam, you've been saying this, whether it comes to fruition or not, could he get replaced as the primary runner there, whether it's Bucky Irving or somebody else? So yeah, there's questions I think with all of these guys, but I think when you start to tier them, which is what the purpose of the exercise is here and the show, is like, okay, where do you feel comfortable? Do you want to buy into a tier 3 running back in the late round 2, early round 3 range? Or do you want to wait until middle of round 3, round 4 for any of these guys? And, if you draft not necessarily hero RB, because this is not the group you want to have just as your sole running back and then wait. But if you do take this as one of your only running backs, or you do go 2 running backs in the first 4 rounds, these are great second running backs, so it's a good place to find yourself depending on if you're in a 2 receiver league or a 3 receiver league and how your build wants to start out.
So let's say you have a late round 2 pick, because that's when some of these guys in tier 3 are going to start to come into the equation. Etienne, Cook, Pacheco, Henry, White. If you skip them in round 2 and round 3, okay, let's say you start Breece Hall in round 1 and then receiver or receiver tight end or whatever. How confident are you that anyone in tier 4 is going to make it to you at, let's say, 45th overall with your 4th round pick? So tier 4 would be Kamara, Jacobs, Achane, Walker, Mixon. You skip the tier 3 running backs. You try to wait until late round 4 to take your first running back. Can you get, Heath, you're confident you can get Kamara, Jacobs, Achane, Walker, or Mixon?
Are we drafting with Joel Cox? Because otherwise, I'm pretty sure Ken Walker's going to be there at the end of round 4. If Joel's not in the draft. I just talked to Joel last weekend about this, so he's okay with that joke. But yeah, I think you can count on one of those guys getting there. I will just say, I'm a little bit higher on some of the guys in tier 3. I'm not. It's really hard for me to imagine a situation where I'm passing on Cook and Etienne and Rachaad White and Pacheco in round 3. Like maybe I missed those guys or something, but I'm generally not letting those guys get past round 3, which is why I'm drafting running backs a little bit earlier than I have in past years, because they are sometimes falling there.
So 2 points there, Adam. I did a magazine draft for another publication, and exactly what he said. So I started with Ja'Marr Chase, and Saquon Barkley were my first 2 picks. I was planning receiver in round 3. I think I was picking 9th. In a 1 QB league. And then James Cook came back to me in round 3, and I'm like, that's just too good for me to pass up because I'm excited for his breakout potential. Conversely, I was doing a best ball draft where my first 2 picks were Jahmyr Gibbs and Marvin Harrison Jr. I actually got auto picks. I wasn't ready for the start of the draft. But those were my first 2 picks. And then there were plenty of running backs available. You certainly find that. I'm sure Heath has seen it a lot. Best balls, mostly receivers get way pushed up. So if you're in a redraft league and these running backs are all gone, so you're talking about It's 3 in round 3 in tier 1, so 7 after tier 2, and here's 10 more guys, so 17 running backs are gone the first four rounds. That's a lot of talented receivers that are going to be landing in your lap, or tight end or quarterback. And so don't just draft one of these guys if you're not in love with them to take them, because there's probably going to be some very good wide receiver talent. So let's just say you went Gibbs or Barkley or Taylor at the back end of round 1 and paired that with Puka or Harrison or whoever you want to go with. Let's say it's Harrison. Your third or fourth receiver, which could be either your second receiver in flex or second and third receiver in your 3 receiver league. I like that start better, as opposed to, panicking just because you feel like you have to draft one of these guys. If you don't love any of these guys, then let them go.
So just scanning early average draft position. It's July 16th right now. And looking at the fourth tier for Jamie of Kamara, Jacobs, Achane, Walker, Mixon. Jacobs and Achane, and not in that order. Achane, Jacobs. Those guys are round 3 picks and most drafts. And Achane is even going to be a round 2 pick. Like, people love Achane more than
Jacobs round 2 in our ADP too.
Let me check right now. Our PPR ADP, Josh Jacobs is 26th.
Okay.
In our ADP, let's see where, and then like Ken Walker, Mixon, and Kamara are round 4 or 5 picks. So if you were just doing tiers based on ADP, they'd be separate. And I think I love that. Like, that's great to know, because why would you take Achane in round 2, which a lot of people are doing, when you can wait 24 picks later? You could wait 2 full rounds later and probably get one of Kamara, Walker, or Mixon. You might even be able to get 2 of them. You might be able to get them in rounds 4 and 5 if you wanted to do that. So that's just important to know. If you look at that 5 running back tier, Achane and Jacobs go early, and then Kamara, Walker, and Mixon in some order go significantly later, honestly. So,
and I think a lot of people that have been playing best ball over the summer probably see Achane at that 2-3 turn. And I just want to say, in that format, it makes a lot more sense. Like, especially
100%.
if you're one of these guys that's drafting 50 best ball teams and just like trying to hit the $1 million prize. Achane 2-3 turn makes all the sense in the world. It's because I think he's a better chance that he's a league winner than anybody else in this tier. I also think that, like, he might touch the ball 8 times a game.
Right.
Okay.
You lose anybody else around these guys, it doesn't really impact them to the same level that if Mostert wins the lottery and goes on vacation.
Okay, let's take a break and come back and talk about tier 5 out of 13 or 12. Okay, we'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. Oh, we're back. Okay, so let's talk about tier 5. Only 3 players in this tier: Zamir White, David Montgomery, and Rhamondre Stevenson. Jamie, we did a show, I don't know, a couple weeks ago where we talked about a group of like 11 running backs. And I think it started with this group. It was like Zamir White, Montgomery, Stevenson, and then probably tier 6 after that. Mm-hmm. So what separates Zamir White, David Montgomery, and Rhamondre Stevenson in tier 5 from Jonathan Brooks, Najee Harris, Zach Moss, Tony Pollard, James Conner, DeAndre Swift, Aaron Jones? And yes, I'll go over those names later when we get into tier 6, but they're right behind them. So it's Zamir White, Montgomery, and Stevenson just ahead.
For me, a lot more questions with the guys behind these 3. So while we talked about this yesterday on Sports Network, that Zamir White does have the Alexander Madison, sort of model that he's following of small sample size of being the guy, and then can he handle it for a full season? I'm going to buy into the way that the offseason went for the Raiders and how they're going to use him, and just hope that it's not the case of just, being I don't want to say one-hit wonder, but not being able to hold up to that type of, opportunity and workload and all those things that go with it. Montgomery just feels safe. I know they're going to give Jahmyr Gibbs more work. They've had 3 guys in the last 2 years score double-digit touchdowns. It feels like he's a lock for 10+ touchdowns, even in a reduced role. And so that still puts him in the top 20-ish range for me, because I don't think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to take all the work. And you have the flip side. We can't just sit here and say, wow, Jahmyr Gibbs would be awesome if there was no David Montgomery. Well, David Montgomery would be pretty awesome if there was no Jahmyr Gibbs, and he missed any time, and he didn't miss a game last year as well. And then for Stevenson, the Patriots are probably going to be bad. And we don't know exactly how they're going to use Antonio Gibson, but the contract that they just gave him, I think, kind of speaks to they're going to use Rhamondre Stevenson as a workhorse guy. And everything you're hearing out of New England is it feels like they're going to treat him that way. And I know last year got off to a miserable start from the year before was much more of a guy that was trending in, as a lot of people had him last year, as a breakout candidate. But he started to, get back to being at a much more productive level prior to the injury. And so I think better quarterback play in New England because it can't get much worse. Better offensive line, hopefully better play calling. As long as Stevenson is still a 30 to 40 catch guy, I don't think that will necessarily go away. I don't think Gibson takes all that work. He should be better as a rusher. So for me, these three guys are a little bit of a different spot. Jonathan Brooks would be in this group if he's cleared for camp and ready to go. But the rest of the guys will probably be behind him unless there's a trade in Chicago. Then DeAndre Swift will probably jump up a tier as well.
Yeah. These are PPR tiers. I should mention that. Zamir White, David Montgomery, Rhamondre Stevenson. Stevenson has benefited from PPR, but it might be a little bit different now. I mean, I have mentioned that as he's been a pretty damn good pass catcher in his career, or prolific pass catcher, he's caught a lot of passes. Almost all of them have been on first and second down. And the Patriots, so even if he isn't the third down guy, which he won't be, you would figure with Gibson there, that hasn't mattered in the past. But the Patriots have been 4th and 6th in running back targets on first and second down. Jacoby Brissett has never been a guy who's thrown to his running backs. Rookie quarterbacks typically don't throw to their running backs. So that's the risk with Stevenson. Heath, do you feel comfortable with this tier? Zamir White, David Montgomery, and Rhamondre Stevenson.
Well, I agree with these three in this tier. It's just that I've got 12 names in this tier. I think that this is where the glob starts. And so I've got basically almost everyone in tier 6 would also be in this tier for me, as well as Jaylen Warren, as well as Javonte Williams, and Raheem Mostert. Like, I think it's just a big Zamir White at the top of this tier kind of identifies the whole thing. There's a path to him being a top 12, top 15 running back this year based on volume. There's also an Alexander Madison path for him. That would be kind of funny because it would probably involve Alexander Madison taking the job. But the nice thing is if you view it that way, and I think even with White, Montgomery, and Stevenson, like even with those three names, there might be a pretty big difference between where they go in your drafts. Just because somebody's going to have a favorite out of that group and take them in round 5, and one of those guys is probably falling around 7 or round 8.
Yeah, based on early average draft position, the favorites appear to be Rhamondre Stevenson and Aaron Jones, who's in the next tier.
Aaron Jones is one of the guys that I actually don't have in my 12-man tier because I'm terrified of his situation. But yeah,
all right. Let's talk tier 6 for Jamie. So tier 6 after the 3-man tier of White, Montgomery, and Stevenson in tier 5. Tier 6 is Jonathan Brooks. Jamie already said would move into tier 5, pending some positive medical developments there with his ACL. Jonathan Brooks, Najee Harris, Zach Moss, Tony Pollard, James Conner, DeAndre Swift, and Aaron Jones. Jonathan Brooks, Najee Harris, Zach Moss, Tony Pollard, James Conner, DeAndre Swift, Aaron Jones. Jamie, how would you define tier 6?
Blech.
No, I like this tier.
This is the tier where if you go hero RB, you'll start to look for your second running back. This is the tier where if you go 0 RB, you'll probably start to look for your first running back because they'll be in the round 6+ range. Like I said, there's paths for a couple of these guys, specifically Brooks and Swift. If some things change, Brooks gets 100% health by the start of week 1. I think would make a lot of people happy, but clearly when drafts are happening, from training camp on prior to that point. And then if there's a trade in Chicago, which I would love to see happen, but we know we don't always get that, those kind of things to come to fruition. But it feels like there's just a lot of mouths to feed in Chicago. Now they may just be guys, and Swift might be better than those guys because Roschon Johnson didn't show anything last year, and Khalil Herbert's not exactly been a consistent producer. So may just be overvaluing those players, and Swift should be higher. But I mean, Pollard's got concerns that he's even the best guy on his team. Conner is coming off another productive year, but he's a year older with some significant competition. And the role in the passing game was a little tough to trust. Najee Harris, we know the situation there because of Jaylen Warren. So there's a lot of questions with these guys, and I agree with Heath. Aaron Jones is terrifying, but Is he terrifying from the standpoint of age? Yes. Is he terrifying from the standpoint of workload? I don't know. I think they're going to give Ty Chandler plenty of opportunities to get playing time, but is he going to, kick Aaron Jones off the field for significant stretches? I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Could be wrong, but that's why I still put Jones in this group. And I'm sure that's why people are drafting him where they are. And then Zach Moss has, the injury track record on top of going to a new team, but it feels like it's a good fit. So there's a lot of questions with these guys, more so for me than the guys in front of them.
Prediction. The player who moves from tier 6 to tier 5 for Jamie will not be Jonathan Brooks. It will be Zach Moss.
I'm too much of a Chase Brown guy, I think, for that to happen.
Okay. All right. For a lot of people, I think it might be, though. Go ahead.
Prediction. Zach Moss is below 4 yards per carry this year.
No, I don't think so. 4.1.
I think there's a pretty big difference between going from the Colts run game to the Bengals run game, and the Colts line to the Bengals line.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how good the Colts line has been. I feel like it's kind of lived off its reputation from a few years ago.
The Bengals have just been bad, though.
They haven't been that bad. They're usually, look, I don't really know what metric to look at. That's PFF usually has them in the 20 to 23-ish range. They're never good. But
mostly, I just don't actually believe that Zach Moss is a better rusher than Joe Mixon. And we've been killing Joe Mixon for his lack of efficiency in this offense. No,
that's the whole point. I don't think he's better than Joe Mixon either, but I don't know that he's worse. His metrics have been better, but he does. That's what I love about Zach Moss. He doesn't have to be that good. That Joe Mixon hasn't been that good of a rusher. He's top 12 running back 5 of the last 6 years, right? That's just.
I don't think he's going to have the Mixon touches. I think Jamie's Chase Brown is going to be more involved with Moss than he was with Mixon.
That's part of it. I mean, again, it's hard to say because he hasn't really, been put in this situation. But when he was in Buffalo, it felt like every time he started to get going or got opportunities, he had some sort of injury. He was injured at Utah, and when he's played, he's been awesome. I mean, we saw it last year. He was fantastic. So the offense is catered to him, based on how he runs out of shotgun, and I think that's why they targeted him. So he's a good fit for what they like to do. But I think this is where Adam's coming from. Joe Mixon's total production, fantasy-wise, is hard to get past. Plus, this offense just feels like it could be amazing if Joe Burrow stays healthy. And so the running back, whoever it may be, which is why I draft a lot of Chase Brown, whoever it may be, will end up being a pretty significant contributor. So it's hard to get past that. So that's why, for me with this group, it's, I like the fact that Najee Harris lost weight and is getting a coordinator that is going to focus on, feeding his running back. Not that hasn't been the case for him, but, while Jaylen Warren's a significant factor, I think Najee's still going to lead them in carries and touchdown potential. So that's why I have him ranked ahead of Warren. For Connor, look, we keep writing him off year after year. And, last year, despite, the quarterback production up and down because of Kyler's, injury, first 1,000-yard season, first time averaging 5 yards per carry, the passing game work was hard to get past. But as you noted, Adam, it changed a little bit when Kyler was there as opposed to when Josh Dobbs was the quarterback, so, that might just be something that we're undervaluing a little bit, in what he's capable of doing. But again, Trey Benson there. So this group just has a lot of questions, and I think for stretches of the season, they're going to be really good, a lot of these guys. But overall, there could be a lot more issues than there are, a lot more risk than there could be reward.
James Conner, by the way, we want to go back to the beginning of the show. How many running backs have been great with a mobile quarterback? And James Conner, now Kyler's a bit of a different story because he throws a lot and he will throw to his running backs. But James Conner's been probably second round good, and with Arizona. And the last 8 games of the year with Kyler Murray, he averaged 15.4 non-PPR, 16.6 half PPR, 17.8 full PPR points per game. That was only a 40 catch pace. That would have basically made him a top 5 running back in any format. James Conner finished his last 5 games. He scored more than 22 points in 4 of his last 5 games. He had an absolutely massive finish, and he had 53 carries in his last 2 games. So Conner, it is just age really, because when he's been with Arizona, he's been phenomenal. Okay, let's go to tier 7. Tier 7 is Tyjae Spears, Jaylen Warren, Brian Robinson, and Raheem Mostert. Spears, Warren, Robinson, Brian Robinson Jr., and Raheem Mostert. Heath, you already said Warren and Mostert would have been in a previous tier, right? An earlier, better tier.
Yes. Yeah. And the more that I hear the talk out of Washington, I wonder, especially in half PPR, if we're too low on Brian Robinson. It sure sounds like Robinson's going to have more touches this year than Austin Ekeler is. And Eckler's age, if something happens to him, Robinson might just be like a must-start running back. So this is about where I would have him. But I think Robinson and Spears fit pretty well together as guys that can be flexes if the starters are healthy and could be league winners if they just are better than the starters or if the starter goes down.
All right, Jamie, what do you have to say about tier 7? Tyjae Spears, Jaylen Warren, Brian Robinson, and Raheem Mostert.
Very excited about the first three. Mostert is the one that concerns me the most just because, again, 32 years old with another player in the backfield added to the mix in Jaylen Wright. I don't think he's going to do very much if everybody's healthy, but I just don't expect 18 rushing touchdowns again from Raheem Mostert. And if that goes away to even half, which feels like probably could happen, then where does he end up? Because if Achane stays healthy, clearly there's going to be more work for him. Now, he said it, he may be 8 to 10 touches a game and can still do plenty of damage in those 8 to 10 touches. I get that because he was doing it last year. But this is just the push and pull of how you feel about the Dolphins backfield. If you feel like Achane's not going to have this big breakout season, you should be in the Mostert camp. If you feel like Achane is going to have that season, it's hard to buy into Raheem Mostert. And so for me, I'm sort of, trying to be in the middle somewhere and maybe too low on Mostert and probably too low on Achane. But I believe more this is an age thing for me, like to get behind a guy that's been so productive and should still be productive despite being 32. It feels as if the Dolphins the last 2 years have tried to find ways to replace him. And this year, again, leaning in a different direction. You've heard Mike McDaniel say he doesn't have any idea how his backfield is going to play out from a touch perspective. He's going to let it sort of, happen organically. It's hard to overlook the fact that you got some other really talented guys that might be more explosive than Mostert at this point.
Yeah, he did say within that same breath, Mike McDaniel said that Mostert was kind of the leader of the group. And then he said,
as he should.
Yeah, well, so it's like he enters as the leader. Doesn't mean he's going to keep it. It's funny to ask this question about this group when Mostert was a top 5 running back last year, but who in tier 7 has the most upside? Spears, Warren, Robinson, or Mostert? Let's say non-injury upside. Who has the most upside? Spears, Warren, Brian Robinson Jr., or Mostert?
For me, it's Spears just because of what you're hearing in Tennessee. Like he might not need an injury to be the best running back on his team.
I'll be the lazy one and just say Mostert.
Okay. Tier 8, Javonte Williams, Austin Ekeler, and Devin Singletary. Javonte, Ekeler, and Singletary. And Heath, you have Javonte. I think, Jamie, you're kind of worried about Javonte, right?
I think everybody aside from Heath is worried about Javonte, maybe Javonte's parents. Based on everything you're hearing out of Denver, it's just, I know Sean Payton kind of, tried to squash some of the conversation, but everybody who watched, the offseason workouts sounds like, Estime before his injury was going to maybe steal the job, and now McLaughlin is going to be the guy that looked the best. The undrafted rookie free agent that they signed, I forget his name, Blake Watson maybe, had a strong camp. Samaje Perine still there. There's just a lot of mouths to feed if they keep everybody. Like I would love to see, the two players that would make draft season a little bit more fun would be either Javonte Williams or Khalil Herbert getting traded to Dallas, and just to see how that would change, a couple of backfields here, because I think Javonte's talented. I think he's going to be better, year 2 coming off the ACL. I just don't know if he's going to be the guy that gets the majority of touches in his own backfield, which is scary to me.
It's kind of crazy. We're 30-something running backs in. We haven't had a Cowboys running back yet. But yeah, tier 8 is Javonte Williams, Austin Ekeler, and Devin Singletary. And by the way, Jamie, the undrafted running back that the Broncos added was Quan Alexander. Now, it was Blake Watson. For those of you who watched FFT Express last week, I think you'll get the Quan Alexander joke. It was very funny.
What was I trying to say?
Oh man, I don't even remember, but it was just so funny to say Quan. Just like, oh, Quan Alexander, like hitting this free agent linebacker. Hey, Heath, do you want to add anything about Javonte Williams?
I am scared. Like Jimmy said, everybody's scared, but me, I am scared. If I wasn't scared, I think I'd probably have him in the top 20. But I'm mostly scared because of Sean Payton. I think a lot of the talk that's come out of Denver, it just like whatever your perception was before that can shade how you perceive that. Like remember the Jaleel McLaughlin is the lead back talk, and Adam, you and I both listened to that 60 seconds, and it seemed like Sean Payton said nothing at all.
Right. And
some people heard him talking about Jaleel McLaughlin and thought he was the starting running back. I think Javonte is the most likely back. That maybe the more important thing is I want to have pieces of this Denver backfield. I'm a little higher on Jaleel McLaughlin as well. The Broncos led the NFL in running back target rate last year, and that's not a Russell Wilson stat at all. Russell Wilson never wanted to do that before Sean Payton made him. And Bo Nix that's exactly what he wants to do, is get the ball out as quick as possible. They'll have 500 running back opportunities this year. That's carries plus targets. They'll split it up between at least two guys. Nobody's going to take even 70% of those, probably not 60%. But it is the type of running back room, especially in full PPR, where there is a profit to be made, especially if none of them are being taken before round 7 or round 8. Take 2 or 3 of them. Pick your favorite. If it's, I'm a pretty hesitant on these rookies, and like I've moved Xavier Worthy down for the same reason. These rookies that miss a big chunk of the summer, but it's probably easier to do it as a running back than it is as a wide receiver.
The one thing is, though, you look at the backfield there. He inherited one guy. Everybody else he brought in. And the one guy he inherited was Javonte.
Well, I think it's funny just to hear Heath say he wants a piece of the Broncos backfield, because they could be the worst offense in football. But he makes a really good point. They throw to their running backs. They will likely throw to their running backs, maybe at the highest rate in the NFL. So that's just, it's really important. All right, we're almost out of starting running backs. We're almost out of guys who could line up as the starter. Not quite there yet, but tier 9 is Trey Benson, Nick Chubb, and Gus Edwards. Why is Trey Benson in this? Why is he ahead of all the other rookie potential handcuff guys? Or I guess you see him as more than that. Trey Benson, Nick Chubb, Gus Edwards in tier 9.
I do. I see him as somebody who's going to have a role for the Cardinals. Again, this is banking on James Conner, who's missed, 3+ games almost every year of his career. This is counting on, him, 29 years old, Conner, maybe missing more time than that, so I'm baking that into how I rank Conner, which is why he's in tier 6 and why I'm a little bit more excited about Trey Benson. So that's why he's here. Clearly Chubb will move up a tier or 2 if he's cleared and ready to go for camp. And, it was very encouraging to see the 800+ pound squat that he did, recently, that was posted on social media yesterday, looking like he's, getting closer to be 100%. So hopefully that's the case. And Edwards also could move up a tier as well. He just has the limited role in the passing game. And I think everybody's just saying, okay, he's A, going to be the best running back for the Chargers, and B, he's going to score 13 touchdowns again. Neither one is a guarantee. So a guy that doesn't have a role in the passing game, while they will be better running the ball, it still could be J.K. Dobbins having a significant role, and obviously Kamani Vidal, who, for me, based on value, is the running back I want to get. But yeah, Edwards and Chubb can easily move ahead of Benson and up a tier also.
I actually have Benson a tier higher than this, so I think Jamie's right to have him ahead of the rest of the rookies. I'd put him and Zach Charbonnet both a little bit higher. Benson, because like we just talked about with Connor, we think he's going to be really good, except he's probably going to miss 4 games or more, and he's older, so maybe it's more. Right. The second that James Conner gets hurt, I think Trey Benson's a must-start running back.
And Gus Edwards, how many do you have your projections in front of you, Heath?
I do, but don't ask me about the Chargers. Are you kidding me? You're going to ask me what I think the Chargers are going to do with their running backs.
I just want to know how many carries you think he'll get. You think he'll get 200 carries, Gus Edwards?
I've got him at 172. This is one of the guys that I have probably lower. I don't want to draft Gus Edwards.
Well, I just want to say this about Edwards. Like last year, he had 198 carries and 12 catches on a per game basis while scoring 13 touchdowns.
He was RB 45 or something.
33 in PPR, 28 in half PPR, 22 in non-PPR.
And that's per game?
That's per game.
Okay.
With 13 touchdowns.
Right.
So that's not bad. I mean, look, if you get RB 28, let's say, you could like do a little bit better than that. That's not bad here after pick 100. But maybe he'll catch more than 12 passes. I don't know, but that's not really his thing. All right, let's go to tier 10. Tier 10 is hey, if you want a piece of this backfield but you don't want the starter, go to tier 10. Jerome Ford, Chase Brown, and then you got two Cowboys actually: Zeke and Rico Dowdle, Blake Corum, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Zach Charbonnet.
There could be 4 starters in this tier. Jerome Ford could very easily start the first however many games of the season. Zeke's probably the starter for the Cowboys. We just talked about how Jaleel McLaughlin might be the guy for the Broncos, and Zach Charbonnet could be the starter for the Seahawks.
I do not think Zach Charbonnet has a chance of starting week 1. Like, Walker's going to have to lose that job, I would think.
I think when you're talking 2 second-round running backs and a brand new coaching staff that has no affiliation with either, I wouldn't say it's impossible.
I mean, I'm not really drafting Ken Walker because I also fear Charbonnet. I maybe not quite as much as you do, but I think we mostly agree. But all right, but on paper, I feel like that's kind of what this
What
is.
if the new coaching staff really loves Ken Walker though, and Charbonnet's just an afterthought?
That's true. Could be.
Yeah. Anyway, this is a way to get a piece of these backfields here, guys who may not be the starter. Jamie, actually, the Athletic just had their beat writers pick a breakout for each team, and the Cowboys guy picked Rico Dowdle. It feels like Dowdle will be the guy.
It makes total sense, and which is why they're very close for me in my rankings, as you see here. And it's hard to get excited about Zeke at his age and the way that he looked, the last time he was in Dallas, and even the way he looked in New England. Now he got saved by his role in the passing game. He's still a very good pass protector, and you kind of feel like, assistant head coach Jerry Jones is going to want to see Ezekiel Elliott in the end zone a bunch of times. So that call might get, sent down to the, play caller. But in any event, yeah, I mean, look, if Zeke can't hold up, Dowdle's never been healthy and he's never been given this opportunity before. And I wouldn't rule out a trade, because the Cowboys, the one thing that offensive line has turned over a little bit. The second receiving options are questionable. They've never had a hole in the backfield like this, certainly in the Dak Prescott era, and it feels like for a long time. And so, you're asking Zeke at his age or Dowdle and his, inexperience to step in and be these guys. I had some conversations with people over the last couple of days. What about Deuce Vaughn? Well, he's tiny. So will they go out and make a move? Will they be aggressive, to find another option or maybe the starter? So just keep that in mind, which is why these guys are sort of, pushed down a little bit for me. But yeah, if you want to get a piece of the Cowboys backfield, clearly Dowdle's the cheapest, and Zeke's still got the name recognition. So for me, I tend to, let somebody else take Zeke and I go for Dowdle. But yeah, either one of these guys in this range is fine.
But also Jerome Ford, Chase Brown, Ezekiel Elliott, Blake Corum, Rico Dowdle, Jaleel McLaughlin, Zach Charbonnet. How many of them have, not necessarily a fantasy relevant role? Actually, how many of them have a fantasy relevant role without any injuries in the backfield? So let's say Nick Chubb is playing. Let's say Ken Walker is the starting running back, kind of a similar setup to last year. Heath, what do you think? How many of these guys have a flex-ish role? So
I think Zeke, and like you're saying, let's say Nick Chubb is healthy, but he's not. So I'll say Zeke and Jerome Ford, and I would guess Jaleel McLaughlin has a fantasy relevant role without an injury. I think he's probably a top 2 back.
So they have to be flex options, is what you're saying?
Yeah, like a bye week flex option. Okay, the top 36-ish running back. Oh, I'm in a pinch. I'll throw Chase Brown in and hope to get 8 points or something like that.
Bye week flex option, all of them without hesitation. No bye week flex option, I think Ford, because what Heath is getting at is that Nick Chubb, no matter if he starts the season in week 1 or maybe even by week 10, is not going to most likely be Nick Chubb. And they've used 2 guys always with Nick Chubb to begin with. So I think Ford for sure. One of the Cowboys guys for sure. I think McLaughlin for sure. And then I also think Chase Brown. I think we're going to see him be potentially, a borderline flex in PPR right now.
I'm not convinced on Corum.
I'm not convinced on Corum either.
Yeah. All right, let's go to tier 11. I'm not convinced on him like having a flexi role.
I agree, but you also have Kyren Williams, who, despite his breakout season last year, missed 4 games.
No, look, I'm not saying he shouldn't be in that tier. I was just saying for that specific discussion. Tier 11 and tier 12 will finish up here. A lot of names. But tier 11, Tyrone Tracy Jr., Marshawn Lloyd, a couple of rookies there. Ty Chandler, Elijah Mitchell, Kamani Vidal, Jalen Wright, Bucky Irving, Antonio Gibson, Kendry Miller, and Chuba Hubbard. Wow. Tyrone Tracy, Marshawn Lloyd, Ty Chandler, Elijah Mitchell, Kamani Vidal, Jalen Wright, Bucky Irving, Antonio Gibson, Kendry Miller, Chuba Hubbard.
So I want to ask you guys a question because I told you I'm writing my running back preview. And one of the things, like my top 10 backup running backs that would become starters if the starter goes down. And there's like a difference between a pass catching back who's probably going to remain a pass catching back even if there's an injury. Is Tracy someone who could actually carry the ball double-digit times per game? I just kind of view him as he's probably going to be the passing downs back early in the season. But if there's an injury, he's probably going to be the passing downs back.
Yeah. I wouldn't put him in your article personally because
it's tier 11. So I'm not criticizing his inclusion on this list. I'm just like, do you view him as someone who's like maybe a PPR flex if everything goes right? But does he have upside if there's an injury, or do they just put Eric Gray in that early downs role, or some guy they pick up off the street in that early downs role?
I would guess that depending on how the season is going, if they're a competitive team and he's doing well in a role, they probably don't change him in that role. If they stink, shocker, then they may give him the opportunity if Singletary misses time to prove if he can be that guy because he's still, learning the position.
Right. And that's the thing. I was like going to make the Matt Breida point. You're going to go chasing these guys, and I don't think you're going to be really any good, and they're going to be a terrible offense. So, yeah, he probably would split. I don't know. But I think, go ahead.
The difference is like if something happens to Christian McCaffrey, I think Elijah Mitchell's probably going to touch the ball 15 to 20 times a game. If something happens to Aaron Jones, I think Ty Chandler is probably going to touch the ball 15 to 20 times per game.
Yeah.
I don't know where Jalen Wright fits in that conversation either.
So the way that I approach this group is floor versus ceiling and what you need for your team. So Tracy, in what I expect his role to be, is more in line with what Adam was asking about the previous tier. Can they have some flex appeal without an injury? If you're just looking to sit on a player on your team to have the league-winning type of upside, that's obviously Elijah Mitchell. I think that's more Marshawn Lloyd. Chandler is probably a guy that's going to play, but I don't think he's going to have maximum value unless Aaron Jones gets hurt. So that's sort of a mix with this group. Like, I don't think Bucky Irving's going to have I think Bucky Irving's going to play a little bit, but I don't think he's going to have that type of upside. Like Antonio Gibson, Tyrone Tracy, they feel the same to me. Like they're going to be in a role that if they play enough, you can potentially start them.
Yeah, I think Ty Chandler is maybe a little underrated. I'm not sure there's a huge difference between him and Blake Corum. What's the difference?
Talent. But yeah, I see your point from a role standpoint.
I think we're also expecting the Rams offense to be better than the Vikings offense.
Yeah, for sure. All right, and then tier 12, is Dobbins, Roschon Johnson, Ray Davis, Tyler Algier, Braylon Allen, and Audric Estime. Dobbins, Roschon Johnson, Ray Davis of the Bills, Tyler Algier, Braylon Allen of the Jets, Audric Estime of the Broncos. Does Khalil Herbert not make the list?
Not for me, no.
Okay. What's tier 12?
The last few guys in my rankings. I mean, Algier, the situation. He's going to need an injury. He's a great handcuff if you want to go that route. I think Algier and Allen are just strictly handcuffs at this point. Dobbins will probably move up if he's 100% healthy and, looking good in training camp. He won't move up significantly, but I'll probably move him ahead of Vidal. Davis, I think, is totally dependent on touchdowns. He may get some carries throughout the course of a game. I can't imagine having more than 5 touches, but I'm expecting, James Cook to have a breakout season. I know Heath did as well. And then Estime was higher prior to the injury. But again, just this Broncos backfield is just one of those things that's a little bit of a mystery. So for me, it's Williams and McLaughlin as the top two guys going into the season right now.
I think we're done. Unless Heath, should we
Has
be done?
anybody said anything about J.K. Dobbins' health this summer? Like, I feel like I've heard nothing.
There was a video of him working out that he looked like he was, moving fine, as opposed to the last time we saw an early video from him coming off an injury where he was still limping. So, no, we have not heard anything or seen anything, but, it's such a mystery with that team. Edwards got hurt already, so I know he's supposed to be fine. That, like I said, going back to the Edwards conversation, just and Vidal's in this group. That's why I want a piece of the Chargers backfield. I think it's going to be a very productive backfield. So I'm just going to take the youngest one and the cheapest one, which is, for me, it's Vidal.
Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. This has been running back tiers. We'll have wide receiver tiers on Wednesday. And you know what? I'm just going to let you guess what the Thursday show is going to be. Not going to tell you. We will talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today. We have FFT Express coming up. We have FFT Dynasty coming up. Big day today. See you, everybody.